Welcome to this episode of the Sports World with Patrick. Today, my guest is none other than Edina High School's football coach in Minnesota, Jason Potts. Thank you, Jason, for joining the podcast today. I definitely do want to ask you this first question. What was your motivation to getting into the sport of football? Who was your biggest role model? Um, and then, what made you want to go ahead and coach football?
Yeah, thanks for having me. What got me into football is I was playing. I played since fourth grade. I think my brother got me into football. As I grew up, I just had some amazing coaches. I have a long list of them, but one that stands out the most is probably Darren Lampker. He was my coach in high school, and he was a huge mentor to me, and I really fall on him a lot. I call him frequently. He calls me. Just a huge mentor and in school and life and football. And so that's kind of what made me pursue being a coach is I wanted to give the same experience to players today that I got. And I had another great coach in college. I had Drew Prevett and Frank Hagee, and I just had a lot of good role models. And so I thought, hey, I really loved my experience. Let's try to give back to the kids of today and give them a great experience as well.
Definitely seems like you do have a lot of good role models here. So I know um, time as time goes on, as when you were playing high school, and then when you were playing also, or when you were also playing in college, all your coaches had different philosophies because you played. Were you a running back, correct, or was it
Yeah,
a
taking it back. Yep.
running back? So what coaching philosophies do you have today, and how do you implement that on players, both on and off the field? Compared to the coaching philosophies you grew up with when you were playing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you experience a lot of different coaching styles. You have the hard nosed coach who's going to hold you accountable to every single thing, and he's always about details and touch the line and show up on time and do all of those things. You have more of a player's coach, which is more relationship built, and they're more interested in your life outside of football and how they can support you, and they're talking about your goals and things that are happening to you. There's the X's and O's nerds that are just so dialed in on the plays and the concepts and executing that. And so at a young age, I knew I wanted to be a coach, and I kind of acted as a sponge. I tried to take in everything that I could and pay particular close attention to my coaches as far as like what did they say, how did they prepare, how did they dress, how did they carry themselves. And then I tried to piece together the things that I thought was the best. And I'm not a hard nosed, in your face kind of coach, but I'm not going to ignore you either. I'm going to try to give you the best experience. And I think my philosophy is what does the player respond to best? Some players want that hard nosed, pay attention to detail in your face coach, and I can give that. Some players are really standoffish to that. That's not really a good strategy for them, and they don't like to be pushed in that way. So I like to get to know the players, find out what works best for them, and then try to give them the experience that they want. And as the head coach, I'm interacting with all position groups. So that's a lot of different players. And if I was, a style that a player really doesn't get along with, then I think that's a problem. And so I try to, get to know my players and offer them, a coaching style that fits with however I can get the most out of them. If being a hard nosed coach actually inspire someone to try less or not engage as much, then I got to find a way to engage them as much as possible and get the most out of this experience together. And I'll do my best to do that.
And obviously, all these different coaching philosophies. You were just talking about, how different players respond to different coaches in different ways. And I know in high school, when I was in high school, we always had our freshman, JV, and varsity teams. So every year you're going to have new kids on the roster. So how do you sort of build the team chemistry for those, and how do you sort of have with coaching philosophies? How do you have to approach it with the situation of, I might have some freshmen on the varsity team that, they stepped up during the summer when we were training, and they were top of the line. I want him on the varsity team, not necessarily on the freshman team. But how do you sort of mix that together and make sure the team chemistry stays really well?
Yeah, I think you have to understand the player's maturity level, and that might mean emotionally and physically. So, moving up a young player, they have to be able to physically handle it. You don't want someone paired up against someone that's going to be just a complete mismatch. You're risking injury. So, you want to make sure that they're mature enough to handle that. And then emotionally, as you get older, as the teams climb up more towards the varsity level, it's more intense. The emotions are a little bit higher. The games are a little bit bigger, and there's a little bit more meaning. And you're going to get your name in the paper if you do well, and it's going to be in the paper if you don't do well. So you got to be able to handle those emotions. And so I think when you move younger players up, you got to keep a little extra eye on them, making sure that they're able to withstand the emotional aspect and the physical aspect as well. And, that takes a team of your coaches. You have to have a position coach that's engaged in that process and doing a lot of teaching. I think coaches are teachers, and we have to teach the plays, the X's and O's, but how to carry themselves, how to prepare, how to get enough sleep, how to get enough nutrition, how to ask questions, how to advocate for yourself, how to communicate with teammates. And so for us to bring it all together, we start with our youth programs. We have winter camps all winter long in our community, and then we have summer camps. And we don't just do the skills. We have several conversations about overcoming adversity and resiliency, and what does it look like to be a good teammate. And we start prepping them, and each year it gets more advanced as we grow. And so the goal is by the time they're in ninth or 10th grade, they've got a really good handle on what we're preaching at the varsity level, and so it's not brand new for them, and we can just keep things rolling. We really break it up and chunk it by age, starting down in 6th grade. I meet with a lot of youth players, and we have those camps, and those are great opportunities for players to really get a taste of what it takes to be successful as they climb the ladder closer and closer to the varsity level. And so hopefully when you bring a young player up, they've demonstrated that they can handle it physically and emotionally, and they've learned that through the off-season training that we provide. And then just kind of going through the process with them, always giving them feedback, being an encourager, finding ways to motivate and engage them, and then give them opportunities for them to lead or to interact with their teammates. We do a lot of team building exercises where they get to chat and they get to learn about each other. And I call it my guys. I don't want our players walking by each other in the hallway and just saying hi. I want it to be, that's my guy, that's my teammate. It should be a high five and a bro hug. And so we create those moments where that they can interact inside and outside of football. So it's a long answer, but it's a complicated one.
Yeah. And then so you were talking about how you guys have those camps during the winter and during the summer, and you guys are sort of getting players up to skill. So can you just sort of a little bit more go into detail about how you develop both leadership skills and get these players ready and develop them to have a cohesive dynamic by the time they get to the varsity level.
Yeah, so we have a lot of conversations about what things sound like and what things look like. So when we talk about leadership, we talk about not only leading by example, and we point those out. This would be a chat after one of the camps or before practice, where you have the whole team of a younger level there, and you're explaining, hey, I really liked when I saw a great effort, and I noticed that no one was being an encourager during that great effort, that great practice we had. What I want to see is you guys encouraging each other and having enthusiasm, more enthusiastic verbal. I'm looking for more verbal leadership and explaining that to them, and then holding them accountable to that, so that when we make a great play in those camps, we can kind of take a pause and say, hey, here's a moment where we're talking about being an encourager and celebrating maybe verbally, or a chest bump or a high five, and so that we can create an environment that releases adrenaline and that can be very intense practice. And so we go through those different examples. Or, hey, we noticed that there were some players that weren't really quite reaching the standard that we're asking them to do. I need some of the leaders, and that maybe I pull them aside, and you're a leader. I would love for you to hold your teammates accountable by saying X, Y, Z. And then you're becoming not only a leader through example, but you're holding your teammates accountable, and that can be a very, very powerful thing, and it makes our team better. So I think it happens through several experiences where you have some kind of failure, where you didn't quite have a good practice or effort or an attitude, and then you teach the players through side conversations and team meetings of what exactly to say. How can you say that? Or if someone's saying that to you, how can you respond? And how can we make this a really positive thing? And so it does take time, it does take a process, but it's pointing out the standard and the expectations that we have in practice or any kind of training. And then we tell them exactly what it looks like or what it sounds like in those moments. And then we hold them accountable to that, and keep teaching them and what to say, how to react, how to respond, how your emotions should be. And it's not going to be fluffy and happy all the time. There's going to be a lot of emotions where we're pissed and we're angry and we're sad and we're mad. How do we handle those emotions, and how do we handle it together? And so, you know, you'll hear sports coaches talk about the process. That's it right there, is going through the process together and overcoming those challenges that you experience in individual trainings or games, and then just constantly talking about it and coaching them up and teaching them on those aspects.
Yeah, there's been a few times I remember when I was in high school, because I went to high school in Alabama. So we always had the coaches, talking to the players, and they would give us, those, hey, we got to be leaders, we've got to do this and that. So but then I also do have this question, because I know not every kid who plays football in middle school will end up playing in high school. So how do you guys sort of, what are the big things you guys look for when they come to try out for the football team? What are the really the big traits that you look for to have somebody on your team at Edina in high school? So
Yeah, so I think there's several things that we look at. First of all, we don't have like cuts. We don't cut anybody. So it's really easy to invite people on the team. We're not at a place where we have so many kids that we have to say no. That's a large number for us. But we're looking at kids that are coachable. So if we make a correction on a player, how long does it take them to correct their mistake or learn a new skill? That's a huge task, because then you can determine as a coach how much potential do they really have and where are they at in that process. If it takes a player 20 reps to learn one thing and it takes another player 3 to 5 reps, the player who's making 3 to 5 is going to become a lot better, a lot faster. And so we look at how coachable they are. We look at their attitude. So when things aren't going well, do they give up? Do they fold? Do they become negative? How's their body language? Are they pouting? How do they respond on the next play? Or are they mentally tough? Maybe they made a mistake. Can they forget it and get on to the next play? So being coachable, having resiliency, and then obviously the physical characteristics are really important as well. You're looking at height, weight, speed, strength, how well they can block, how well they can catch or run or tackle. You're looking at all of those things. I think you combine all of those together, and I think of some of the best players that we've had in the past couple of years do all of those qualities. They're extremely coachable, and that allows us to have a more advanced game plan and move at a faster pace. They have a great attitude. So things aren't always going to go well, but they can get through a practice or a tough game and they can be at their best. When you don't have a good attitude, you're not going to play at your physical characteristics aren't going to show up. And then, the easy part is the height, the weight, the speed, the strength. Those things stand out first, right away. And so if you package all of those things together, those are the things that I think our best players have demonstrated in the last couple of years. Those are the things that I'm looking for. And they don't just show up. They get developed over time. And that's why you'll see me integrate myself and my staff with sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade. I want to get to know these kids. I want to know what they need to work on and start working on it now, so that by the time they're in 10th grade, it's go time. they've been around us. They know what to do. It's time to do the work, and so that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, it's I'll definitely tell you. I was watching a few games this weekend, here and there, as I got a chance. I was running. I went to St. Louis this weekend, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but I went to St. Louis for a business trip earlier, this weekend. So didn't get to watch much of it, but got to see sort of the social media reaction to all of what was going on in football. Now, your guys' season's over at this point, correct?
Yep.
So what are the biggest challenges your team faced this last season, and how did they really overcome it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the biggest challenges that we faced was we were right away ranked number one in the state of Minnesota at the 6A level. We had a lot of media attention. We had a lot of great players getting a lot of attention with recruiting. And I think what that did is it raised the expectations for every game, every practice, every rep. And I think that our kids started to chase perfection. And when they didn't get perfection, it was kind of a letdown. And so there was a lot of attention early on. A lot of people were talking about us. We ended up losing a game early in the season, and that started to fizzle away, which actually was a good thing for us. But I think one of the challenges that we had to do, and as the head coach, is I had to really talk a lot about excluding outside influences. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about our team. It doesn't matter if we're expected to win the game or lose the game or be successful versus unsuccessful, and really just put the focus back on ourselves and our core values of having a great attitude, great effort, and then the resiliency skills, and just that being the only focus. And don't worry about social media and what article came out or what was on the news or who tweeted or Instagram this. And we just tried to eliminate those conversations, eliminate that noise. We felt like that really distracted our focus, and it's just out of our control. And so a strategy that my staff and I really tried to implement, and I think we were successful at for the most part. There were times that I felt like it became a distraction, but you just really putting the focus on ourselves and our practices every day, and then performing in the games was something that was important to us.
And then I know as a high schooler, it's really rough. Definitely when you're getting down to that senior year, and you were sort of talking about how you can't let outside noise get into the room because that will impact your way of playing. So, particularly in high school football, how do you prepare your team for the physical and mental demands of the game, and how to sort of shut the noise out that oh well, they were number one ranked in preseason, they lost this game, but they still kept continuing, and they didn't let the outside noise get to them.
Yeah, so I think one of the most powerful learning tools out there is when you're not successful or when you fail. And when we had our game early on in the year, it was week 3 where we lost, that was such a powerful learning tool. It was a conversation where you could say, hey, when we let outside influences start impacting our performance, this is what's going to happen. And we can't control those outside influences. So let's just block them out completely. We obviously want to win every single game that we play or is on our schedule, and we can learn from our mistake where we may have let some outside influences affect our performance. If we continue to do that, we're going to have an even bigger challenge than we already have. And so I think anytime you're prepping your team or you're trying to teach them a skill of whether how to handle it emotionally or physically, it's about when you experience those failures, whether it's losing a game or maybe there's a story in the news that you didn't like or on a social media, is just how do you respond to those? And if the answer is you didn't respond well, then you have to learn how to handle that and fix that and be able to block that stuff out so that you can perform at your optimal level on the field. And so through failures, through conversations, through reflecting, through guidance, through just building really strong relationships with your players so that they trust you enough to so that when you are saying these things, they're believing in the message and then they're following through on it as well. And coaches are guilty of following the noise too and letting outside influences affect them as well. And so myself and our staff, we have a lot of conversations about it. Something might come up in the coach's room and it's like, hey, that's not about what we're trying to accomplish. Let's not waste our time and energy thinking about it. So I think optimizing your time, what you're thinking about, eliminating that, and just really being laser focused on our team goals or our position goals or individual goals is how you accomplish that.
And then on top of sort of coaching these players and going through the drills every single day during practice, what role does really film study, or even how do you sort of prepare for a game, you know not knowing what possible situations you're going to be put in and what plays the opponent's going to play against you when it comes down to crunch time?
Yeah, I think film is one of the most important teaching tools that we have. We film every practice. We film all of our inside runs, 7-on-7, team periods, our special teams. I found it very easy to make corrections in film. And that allows us to practice really fast. Instead of stopping practice and coaching up one player while everyone is waiting for us to move on, we like to practice at a fast pace and we give quick feedback in each rep, without going into this long, elaborate, detailed correction. And then when we get in the meeting time and we're in the classroom and we're watching film, now is the time to give them exactly specifics on maybe their body movement or positioning or technique or read or location of where they're supposed to be or where the ball was, or all of the X's and O's and technique stuff. You can get really elaborate. You have the time. And then all those other players are hearing that same explanation so they can learn from others as well and they can see exactly what it looks like. And oftentimes, players don't fully understand what how their performance or their technique was wrong until they actually see themselves do it on film, and then it makes them more coachable. And so we use film time almost every single day. We film every rep that we can in practice. When it comes to a game, it's another great tool. We're showing exactly the looks that we're going to get, the tendencies, the formations, the blitzes, the front, the coverage, field position, hashes. We really break it down so that going into the game, us coaches are trying to give them everything that we can to give them an edge. So that allows them to play fast, be prepared, and so that we can be successful. And we spend a lot of time watching film of ourselves and then watching film of our opponents to pick up any kind of tendencies or coaching points that we can, so that our players play at their best and they know what's coming and that's not a surprise. Obviously you're going to see plays that you never prepared for. And you're going to see moves or techniques that you've never seen, but is the effort from the coaching staff is to get our players most familiar with our opponent and then most familiar with themselves and the things that they need to work on as well.
Yeah, and so I do also have this question because I know injury does sort of play a role in how you prepare for a team. So let's say their star quarterback is out, or their star running back, or their star center, um, or even somebody on their defensive line is out. How do you sort of adapt your game plan during a game, even if a player gets injured during the game, to sort of exploit your opponent's strengths, and then allow your players to capitalize um, on their weaknesses at that point?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest thing, just going into any game, you're looking at how you can get your best players lined up against their worst players. And so when one of their best players goes out, you definitely want to take advantage of that. Whether you're on offense and you're in the passing game and someone's on the field that you can really take an advantage of, and as a coach, you're going to want to call plays to attack that. Or you see an opponent and you're on defense and their star running back goes on, well, you just have to be mindful of maybe they might start throwing the ball more, and so you're constantly coaching on the fly during the game based off of the things that are happening. You're trying to position your players to put them in the best positions to be successful, and injuries can change a lot of different things. And if you're the person who has the injury and your best player goes out, that might cause you to call the game a little bit differently or put players in different positions. Maybe you bump a safety down to corner and a corner down to alley. So there's a lot of different things that can happen during games, especially during an injury. Just the overall goal is to always get your players in the best position to play, and injuries can impact a lot of different things, and you just want to make sure that you're aware of what's going on the field, and then you're calling a game, or the game plan is designed to put our players in the best position to be successful.
And then I do know, so I did see you joined Edina in 2020, correct, as their
Yep.
head coach.
Yep.
So over the course of your coaching career, what are some of the most important lessons that you've learned that have shaped your coaching approach to the game?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I learned when I became the head coach, that was my first year as a head coach as well. I think I learned a lot, but a few of them is that you have to be able to take care of yourself. It can be very stressful. There's a lot of influences coming down on you, and you have to be able to handle them. Whether it's winning or losing a game, whether it's people complaining about things, whether it's poor performance, it takes a lot of time. You have to be able to organize your time effectively. If you're not contributing to a meeting or it's not doing anything for you, you have to be able to organize your time so that you can get everything done. It is very challenging in that sense. I think the more that you can create a staff around you that you trust and that you can delegate things to is really, really important. And so I think also just being true to yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not. I remember early on, we weren't winning many games, and I thought that I was the problem and that I was being too nice, and I wanted to shift my attitude to be more like that hard nose, get after you in your face kind of coach. But that I knew that that probably wouldn't be successful for a lot of players in today's game. And so I just kind of did some self reflection and figured, what do the players really need from their head coach? And so kind of discovering about what coaching styles you can bring, what do you want to be? If someone was to talk about you, one of your players, if they were going to talk about you, what would you want them to say? So again, being true to yourself and who you want to be, and that's creating some core values, and then delegating and organizing your time. I would say those three things I learned very big lessons, and that took me, probably several years to figure out is those things, and it takes a lot of failure, a lot of lost games, but once you do figure it out, it feels very rewarding, and things start coming your way, and realizing that you're putting it together. It's a very rewarding experience.
And then, so I do also have this question, sort of, because I know in Adina, the really in the state of Minnesota, hockey's a really popular sport there. So how does with football? Because I know football is mainly the more popular sport in the United States. So how does the Adina community support the football team, and how does that influence the team's morale?
Yeah, I think Minnesota, especially at Edina, I would say it's the capital of hockey. It's a very strong interest in hockey. It can be a challenge when players start specializing in one sport and they could be dominant at both. And so when I first started, I started recruiting any athlete that I could in Edina, whether they played hockey or not. And several of them were hockey players, and we started to have some success and show players that hey, we could be really good at both sports, and you can have a great experience in both, and you can build a lot more friendships and relationships and memories if you're involved in more activities. I think the Edina football community, or just the community in general, has been very, very supportive of Edina football, especially these last couple of years. Their interest level has been booming, especially the last 3 years. The support has been fantastic. The excitement, the enthusiasm, anywhere from coming out to the games to supporting our players, to interacting with us, it has been phenomenal.
And then beyond just how well you can coach a team, correct? Um, what do you think are the most important life skills that a coach can teach, or even the sport of football itself, young athletes?
Yeah, and that's why I love football. It's really a tool to teach life skills. And I talked about core values, and one of the things that I love to teach is resiliency. There's a play that happens for on the average of about 6 seconds, and then there's a big pause, and then there's another play for 6 seconds. And so, teaching players to be at their very, very best every play is something that I think is very valuable, because as they grow up and graduate and go on to being a husband, a father, or whatever career choice that they pick, things aren't going to be easy. They're going to be tough. And so, how can you be at your best if things didn't go well for you right away? I think that's an amazing tool to teach young sports athletes is overcoming adversity, being mentally tough, having resiliency skills. And I mean, I could talk about many, many skills. I could go on forever, but I'm going to identify mental toughness. I think another one is how to be a leader, and how to verbally be a leader, how to be an encourager, a motivator, and how to lead by example. I think people get confused a lot about what a really good leader does. I think sometimes leaders like to be negative and like to bring shame and guilt and blame into the picture, when that's the opposite of what a leader is. A leader is someone who verbally encourages and gets the other person to be at a higher level. And so when you can teach someone that, whatever trade they go into or career path or relationships that they do, if they can learn those skills, I think they're going to be more successful as well. And then I would focus on the last thing is being a teammate. And a teammate can be hard. And so, how can you interact with others? How can you have the courage to build a relationship with another person, especially teenagers are oftentimes shy or worried about what other people think about them, and they're fearful of being vulnerable. And so, putting yourself out there in a position to interact with others and to create a really close group of people that you can experience life with, I think that goes beyond football as well. And so, if you take those three things, I think they're very important, valuable tools that can help young people be successful after high school. And I feel like we've done a lot of work in that here at Edina, and really proud of the work that we've put in. And we've had a lot of players graduate and go off and play college football. We've had several players graduate and not play football, and I feel confident that they've had some good experiences that they can use and learn from, and achieve their goals.
Yeah, it's interesting to sort of see the route that some people take beyond high school. Um, and I also do have this question, sort of, a football coach can teach, and the sport of football can really teach only so much, correct? Because there's only 4 years of high school, and you sort of have to work around their schedule because of the academics and all the uh, the extra stuff that they do on all the extra activities outside of football that they do, whatever they're in the student government agency. But I do have this one very important question, because I know every parent thinks, and some families think that their player is the next, Tom Brady, or the next, you know big superstar in the game of football, for the ones that keep going on. So how do you engage with the parents and the families of your players to ensure that that when they go home, they don't end up in a situation where, I remember the movie they filmed about, that one school in California that went undefeated for like 3 or 4 or 5 years. um, and you saw the side where the running back, his dad was so wanting him to break the record that his environment at home was not really, positive or even supportive of what he ended up doing at the very last game when he won when they won the game, even though he didn't get that record.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. It happens frequently in all sports, and I think the message that I could give to people is to find out what your expectations are. Like I tell my players and coaches that there are no expectations. We don't know if we're going to win or lose the game. We don't know if you're going to rush for 1,000 yards or 500 yards or however many yards. And really, those are the outside influences that I'm talking about. I can't control your recruiting. You can't control your recruiting. You know, we're trying to win as a team and lose as a team. And do we want you to have individual records? Absolutely. We're trying to get those. We're also trying to win the game. But I think when people have certain expectations of what should happen and they're set really high, especially from family members, and then when that doesn't happen, I think it's a huge letdown. And I think it's a huge distraction. I think it's an outside influence again. And so, really, it comes back to your core values as the head coach, your core values that you put on your team with your staff, and your goals of what are you trying to accomplish. And, we could get the rushing record, but we could also lose the game. That really doesn't serve everybody's wants and needs. And so again, having no expectations of what really is going to happen. I mean, you can have them, but if it's going to affect your performance or it's going to affect your attitude or it's going to put stress on you, or if you're a father and you're going to put extra stress on your son or daughter on their performance, that's really taking away from their highest potential and what they can do out there on the field. And so you just want those players to have a really good experience. And that's really not putting pressure on them to perform, not having those high expectations so that they're constantly worried about, you know, what happens. I oftentimes see that fear sets in when players are experiencing that adversity because, oh my gosh, what happens if I don't reach my expectation? And so, again, focusing your energy, your thinking, your brain power, what you're really focused on is to be laser focused on your goals of being at your best every single play or every single practice or game, and really let that performance speak for itself, and then not spend a lot of time having that fear of not accomplishing those expectations.
And then obviously in the 4 years that you've been a head coach, what are some of the common misconceptions fans or even families have about high school football that you'd like to address?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about a lot of different things. I recently went to a game. We were knocked out of the playoffs. I went to a game and I sat in the stands and I heard a lot of complaining about officiating. I think officiating is a very difficult job. They're not seeing things in slow motion or on replays, and they don't always have the greatest angle of plays. And so when the speed of the game is happening fast and they're doing their best and they might not have a good angle on it, they're not going to make every correct call. They're not going to see everything that happens on the field, whether they were looking in the right spot or maybe they didn't have a great view of it. I think, supporting our officials, they're doing the best that they can. And so I think it's a misconception that refs are going to make the right call every single time. It's very, very challenging, especially in the speed of the game. And so I heard a lot of talk about officiating. I heard a lot of talk about play calling when I was sitting in the stands recently. Coaches are trying to make the best decision with the information that they have. They have about 20 seconds to decide. They are taking a lot of influences into consideration. It could be the wind, the field position, down and distance, tendency, blitz, coverage, a lot of different things, and they're trying to get that in the best. And so there's a lot of hindsight bias sometimes, and so we're all trying to do our best, and being supportive is the best way to combat that. Like, be supportive of the coaches, be supportive of the referees, be supportive of the players. I saw a player make a mistake on the field, and a lot of people were criticizing that player, and he's just a teenager. Always being supportive in whatever aspect that is, whether it's the player or the referee or the coach. I think that's what improves performance. When complaining or negative attitude or criticism or blame comes into the picture, it really kind of takes away from the experience, because these are kids. This isn't the NFL. We're trying our best and making it as supportive as possible.
Yeah. And then, so your players obviously they have, I guess, a really big plate, really a full plate. So how do you sort of balance the demands that of high school football with the academics and the extracurricular activities for your players?
Yeah, I think it's just sitting down with them and then, coming up with a plan of how they're going to manage their time. Whether it's academics, obviously they're in school all day long, but if they're struggling academically, I do a lot of grade checks. I get a lot of notifications. It's just, how can I support? If I don't know the answer, I should know where to go get the answer. And how can we set up with, extra study time, meeting with the teacher, talking with parents, putting a game plan together for the best understanding academically. And then sports wise, kids are in a lot of different sports. So, we try to talk to other programs and say, hey, we're going to practice at this time. What time are you going to practice? We'd love to make it available so that students don't have to choose which one to attend. It kind of puts them in a bad spot. So we try to plan ahead so that students don't have to choose. They can attend everything. That can be a challenge in itself. And then we talk about a lot about rest and recovery. We don't want someone training 8 hours a day and 7 days a week. We want kids to be kids. We want them to relax and hang out with friends and hang out with family and play video games. We want them to do all that stuff too. And so, having conversations, sitting down, we do a goal sheet. So we talk about, where they should be spending their time, their focus, their energy, and kind of map out, a weekly plan, a daily plan. And then if we need to go further and meet one on one with them and bring in teachers or support staff or parents and or mentors, then we do that as well.
Yeah, and so on top of that, so I know we talked a little bit about earlier where you were talking about Edina, correct?
Edina.
Edina,
Yeah.
where it's it's sort of the hockey capital of hockey in Minnesota. So what are sort of your long term goals for the football program there?
Yeah, so obviously we want to win. We want to win every game. We lost in the finals last year. This year we made it to state and lost in the first round. So obviously my long-term goals would be to win a state championship here. Edina football hasn't been done since 1978. This last year was the first time in school history where we went to state back-to-back years. So obviously one of my goals is to win as many games as possible, win a state title. It's been a long time here at Edina. And then I think just to continue to give a great experience to our players year in and year out. We want students to be chasing their greatest potential and become better people in the process. And that doesn't always mean a better football player. We want them to be really good people. And so, again, when they get older, we use football as a tool to teach those life skills and that they can, reach their highest potential, whether it's being a husband, a father, career choice. That's really important to me. That's why I became a coach, and that's really important to the rest of our coaches. I won't hire anyone that doesn't align with those views. And so, again, win a state title. That's what every coach wants to do. But then to continue to develop ways to engage, to motivate, and to prepare athletes for life outside of football and life and beyond, especially 5, 10 years out of high school.
And then, so I do have this question. Is the first round of the state championship, is that played at USA Bank Arena Stadium, or is that actually
Uh,
played at the high schools?
it's played at a neutral site. The last two rounds, so the finals and the semifinals, are played at US Bank Stadium, and then the round before that is played at a neutral site. So not both teams are on the road.
Okay. And then, so I do have this question also for you. What changes or trends in high school football do you see impacting the game in the next few years? And then, how do you foresee the evolution of high school football in Minnesota, especially in terms of safety and player well being?
Yeah, I think some trends have been closely related to player safety, specifically concussions. I've seen a huge increase in the technology in helmets, the affordability in helmets. Teams are able to purchase some of the newest technology in helmets. They also have guardian caps that can go over helmets as well to provide additional support. I think you're seeing trends in the rules where you can't hit a player above the shoulders. There's no targeting, peel back blocks. They're looking at cut blocking. I think there's a lot of people in Minnesota looking at how to make the game safe as possible. So that we can eliminate these huge collisions that are outside of really the point of attack of each play. So I think coaches are doing a much better job of coaching player safety, tackling. The rules have changed, and so that you're eliminating a lot of the vicious hits that we've seen, in football history. Um, and then I think football is as popular as ever. I think we're starting continuing to grow. Football is a popular sport in the United States, and so is hockey, especially in Minnesota. But I think the popularity is going to continue to grow. It's a great sport, and not only does it teach the X's and O's, but it teaches a lot of great life skills as well.
Yeah, I think it was about 2 3 weeks ago. I interviewed the coach of the University of Minnesota's women's hockey program, and that was a really fun interview to have with him. But I do also have this question for you. What advice would you give to young players aspiring to play at the high school level and beyond?
Oh, that's a great question. What advice would I give a young player to pursue high school football and beyond? I would say, I always kind of go back to my core values of how can you be coachable? How can you optimize your time so that you become the best player, the best person as fast as possible? What qualities do you have to be that coachable person? How can you handle your emotions? So I would say, when things don't go your way, resiliency, mental toughness, calling out when you're, identifying when you're feeling sad, mad, fearful, shameful, guilty. How can you flip those emotions into a positive one, so that you're not, bringing yourself down, so that you can make the next play or make the next test or assignment or be a good friend the next time. So I think if you focus on, a lot of things, but the easy ones that first come to mind is learn how to be resilient and learn how to handle your emotions, and then have a great attitude. Always be positive, be contagious in a positive way, be enthusiastic. And I think you're putting packages together for yourself, but you're also putting positive qualities for your teammates and making a better team.
Yeah, and then I also did have one question. So I know you mentioned that the last few rounds of the state championship are played at USA Bank Arena. Um, and then I sort of had two questions mixed together, but um, first things first, when you go to play at USA Bank Arena, how do you teach your students there to, sort of, because I know student sections are going to come no matter what with their football team, and some student sections are worse than others, with the way they try to get under everybody's or every player on the other team's um, their their skin. So how do you sort of teach them on that? And then is there anything for the kids that end up going to college? Is there, since you played college football, is there any advice you give to them? When they're getting these offers and recruitments ahead of signing day.
Yeah, so your first question about fans, I tell my players don't interact with the fans. Like, don't look at them, don't acknowledge them. We talk about the purpose of what they're trying to accomplish. Do we really want to let someone in the stands affect our performance? Absolutely not. And so our kids do a really good job, but not don't even look at them. You might hear them, laugh it off. That goes to anytime you get trash talked from an opponent. It's just we don't respond. And once you don't respond, hopefully it goes away. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for a response. They're looking for a reaction. And the more you react and the more you respond, the more they're going to do it. So we don't want them to do it. We can shut it down right away by not reacting. We can be very classy. We can show maturity and keep our focus on our core values and what we're trying to accomplish. Your second question about telling athletes what to expect in college football, is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, sort of that, and then also like because I know, um, I'll how do you sort of when it comes to their recruitment, there's some kids that are like, well, I want to go to let's say the University of Minnesota, and then some say, well, I want to go to Michigan, or I want to go to Ohio State, or I want to go to Alabama or Auburn. How do you sort of you know what are sort of the things you teach them to look for when they're in that recruitment process, in order to to ensure they're making the best decision for themselves and their future.
Yeah. So the message that I give to all football players when it comes to recruiting is that there's only one person that should really make this decision. It's not where I want you to go. It's not where any college wants you to go. It's where do you want to go? And you're the one who's going to be going to this school. You're going to be the one doing all the work. You're going to be doing all the experiences. And so that's the most important thing is encouraging kids to understand what is it that you're looking for in a school specifically, whether it's location, size, football, major, cost, scholarship. It Find out what's important to you and then what school fits your needs the most. And so my role that I have with them is just constantly reminding them of that. And then, when they tell me what schools they want to go to, then I work my tail off in trying to connect those coaches to our players, whether it's they watch their film or they have a game day visit or an in-home visit or however I can get those interactions going. But when it comes to advice, if someone were to come up to me and say, what school should I go to? I'm not going to have an answer for you. I'm going to have questions for you. Well, what school aligns with what you want the most, and a lot of young players don't have those ideas set yet. They don't know what's important. They kind of just want to go to the biggest coolest school that they think. And so I always have to kind of narrow it down for them, be specific, exactly what are you looking for, and then how can I help you get those interactions so that you can be recruited the most from that school.
Well, thank you, Jason, for coming on the podcast. You've definitely given all of our listeners a very interesting and important insight into the world of high school football in the United States, and in particular in Minnesota. So thank you for coming on to this episode, and good luck the next season. Hopefully you guys win the state championship next year. Well, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, appreciate it.
Thank you. Welcome.